Friends, welcome to worship at First Presbyterian Church in Bend, Oregon. I'm so glad that you've joined us today. Here I am at the top of the beautiful Oxford Hotel in downtown Bend with a glorious look of the city and the mountains. This month in October, our sermon series is Holy Chaos, getting creative in the midst of conflict. So I thought it would be fun to kind of rise above the fray where we kind of get stuck and just to explore this morning in worship how we might be able to get a broader perspective, a wider perspective. So I am so glad wherever you happen to find yourself today, welcome. I'm glad that you've joined us. In a second, as we make the transition from getting to your screen to being here and being in the presence of God, Hillary Rothert will light our Christ candle. And then our focus for these couple weeks is on our mission and our mission partnership with our brothers and sisters, our Batwa brothers and sisters in Burundi. We partner with them in helping the children of 3 villages go to school, helping them grow crops, and following the lighting of the Christ candle. You'll learn a little bit more about that really exciting mission that is actually changing our lives and how you might support it. But welcome. I hope as we gather and worship today, we might be able to rise above the fray and get a new and broader perspective.
I light the Christ candle this morning with a full heart. Trusting His glorious light will shine brightly through each one of us and into the world. Amen.
Greetings. My name is Jane Kirkpatrick, and 5 years ago I had the privilege of traveling to Burundi, East Africa, to visit 3 indigenous villages of the Batwa people. In 2018, more Presbyterians from then First Pres visited these same villages in the poorest country in the world, Burundi. Since 2015, First Presbyterian has partnered with African Road, a nonprofit in Portland, and Azerjaba, a volunteer group in Burundi itself. And we've been working to bring hope and economic sustainability to these 3 villages, now more than 570 people. Because of our work, these people, these Batwa people, have been able to become citizens with ID packets that we provided for them. And so now they can legally work, they can marry, they can baptize their children, and they can vote. We provided and helped them acquire medical cards so that they can go to the doctor. And as a result, the infant mortality rate has been greatly reduced. We also had a school project, or have a school project, and that project provides uniforms and books and fees for close to more than 200 children who never had a chance to go to school before. In addition, now each of the 3 villages owns their own land. They plant it, they harvest it, and they have food for their families. This has all happened because of your contribution to the $18,000 that we provide every year and have for the last 5 years. We hope you'll enjoy this short video that identifies and tells the story of the Batwa people in their own words about how our partnership has changed their lives. Thank you.
Nshaka kwiga kugira nshinde nzoze ndavura ababanyi n'abagenzi bo ku mutumba wa Mwendo.
Nifuza kuzokwiga amashuri yanje yose ngo ndayarangize kugira ngo nze nshindire ubuganga nze mvura ababanyi tubana.
Ndizeye ko ngiye kurangiza amashuri yanje vuba, indoto zanje zigiye gushika. Muri iyi myaka 5 iheze sinigeze nsiba ku ishure ngo nuko nabuze ibikoresho by'ishure canke amafaranga y'ishure.
N'umunezero udasanzwe dufise n'agateka kubona tunungika abana bacu ku ishuri bakiga nk'abandi bana.
Bimeze neza ubu n'abatware baratwubaha. Iyo bafise imanza baradutumira tukagenda natwe kandi tukatumira wakazi.
Ndabashimiye cyane ingene mwadukoteye imyaba tukarima ibiharage mukaduha ibiharage n'ibirayi mukaduha n'umwavu ndabakengurukiye amahoro y'Imana
Friends, we know what God desires of us, that we do justice and love kindness and walk humbly with God. We know what Jesus asks of us, to love our enemies, do good, and be merciful as God is merciful. In this harsh and often hostile world that lives like a clenched fist, we open ourselves to God's unconditional and boundless love, that we might walk with open hands and tender hearts. Let's worship God.
You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken, and great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. You give
Have you ever gotten into an argument or a fight with someone? Maybe you just didn't see things eye to eye, or you had a different idea about the way things should be. When we find ourselves disagreeing with someone in a big way, we call this conflict. Sometimes we think about conflict as this really bad thing, right? Because often when we disagree with someone, we can become upset or angry, and we might struggle to make loving and peaceful decisions about what we say or do that are good for both us and others. Conflict can make us feel really uncomfortable, so a lot of the time, most of us try to avoid it or run away from it. But conflict isn't really a bad thing. It's actually an opportunity to grow. When we change the way that we think about conflict, we can start to get creative and imagine a whole new way of being together. A way where we don't always have to be right, but rather we try to see things the way others do. We listen deeply so that we can really understand what others are saying and how they're feeling. And then we can best decide how to respond. This can take a lot of patience too, because sometimes we don't solve a conflict right away. Now, what this doesn't mean is that you have to give up on what you know is good and right just to make peace with someone, but rather it's more about being open to the possibility that there could be another way. And more importantly, remembering that the person we're disagreeing with is also a human, just like us, who has their own feelings and unique way of seeing things. We can learn a lot about conflict from Jesus too. For instance, Jesus questioned and pointed out laws and ways people treated others that weren't okay all the time. This created a good kind of conflict where people had to think about the ways they had been acting and what was actually the just and right way to live. The teachers of the law especially didn't like to be challenged in this way. In fact, they would come and ask Jesus these questions, trying to trap him or get him to say the wrong thing. But instead of getting caught up in an argument, Jesus would ask them a question back instead. A question that would lead others to love. Now, what he said might not have changed their minds, but I'm sure that those who listened got curious about what the answer to those questions were and were led to a more loving way themselves. Kind of like us when we read scriptures today. When I look at the life of Jesus, I see how he imagined a different and beautiful way for humans to be together. And he invited all sorts of different people to follow him. People who probably didn't even get along all the time or even agree on a lot of things. Why would Jesus do that? I think because he knew that when we live in a way that puts love first, when we trust God and are willing to not push others out of the way so we can be first or only take care of ourselves, we find that our disagreements can actually be kind of beautiful because they can lead us to curiosity where we learn more about ourselves, each other, and God. And then it makes it so much more clear to know what the loving way is to respond. So this week, I invite you to think about how to be creative in conflict and find ways to bring loving words into your conversation. In Psalm 18:4 it says, "A person's words can be life-giving water. Words of true wisdom can be refreshing as a bubbling brook." So I wonder, how can your words be refreshing? How can you bring peace and love and healing into your conversation, even at home? This doesn't mean you can't disagree with anyone, but rather take some time to think through how you can choose a more loving way to listen and talk through conflict, instead of always having to be right or just thinking about yourself. And now let's say our blessing. May you know you are loved and that we deeply believe in your belovedness. Please join me as we say, you are loved by God no matter what. May you know love, grow in love, and show love to others. Amen.
The writer Anne Lamott says, "I do not understand the mystery of grace. Only that grace meets us where we are and does not leave us where it found us." For our prayer of confession, we reflect on the love of God. We reflect on the love God has for us, the love we witnessed in Jesus, a love that is expansive and boundless, a love that is unconditional, a love that is accepting and gracious, a love that shares our pain and grief, a love that is with us, a love that never leaves us or forsakes us, A love that is merciful, tender, gentle, compassionate. A love that is patient and kind. A love that does not insist on its own way. A love that turns enemies into friends. A love that recreates, renews, and restores us to wholeness. A love that forgives and forgives and forgives and forgives again. Oh God, before your love for us, we confess we have not so loved each other. Forgive us. As the psalmist said, forgive, O God, all that binds us in fear, that we might radiate love. Cleanse our hearts, O God, that your light might shine in and through us. Create in us clean hearts. Put a new and right spirit within us. Friends, hear the good news. You are forgiven. May we now release the energies of love and forgiveness into the world. Amen.
Will you be my refuge, my haven in the storm? Will you keep the embers warm till my fire's all but gone? Will you remember and bring me sprigs of rosemary? Be my sanctuary till I can carry on, carry on, carry on. This one knocked me to the ground. This one dropped me to my knees. I should have seen it coming, but it surprised me. Will you be my refuge, my haven in the storm? Will you keep my embers warm till my fire's all but gone? Will you remember and bring me sprigs of rosemary? Be my sanctuary till I can carry on, carry on, carry on. In a state of true believers, on streets called us and them, it's gonna take some time till the world feels safe again. Will you be my refuge, my haven in the storm? Will you keep the embers warm till my fire's all but gone? Will you remember and bring me sprigs of rosemary? Be my sanctuary till I can carry on, carry on, carry on. can rest here in Brown Chapel or with a circle of friends in a quiet grove of trees or between two bookends. Will you be my refuge, my haven in the storm? Will you keep the embers warm till my fire's all but gone? Will you remember and bring me sprigs of rosemary, be my sanctuary till I can carry on, carry on, carry on, carry on.
Oh God, I just received another political email from my relative who I love. I really do. But who believes it's his job to save me from my erroneous vote. I'm so tired of arguing about politics. I'm exhausted from not knowing who to trust. I'm mad. Actually, it's probably not anger I'm feeling so much as it is grief, deep grief, because I feel this country, my home, is slipping from my fingers. Like this country doesn't really belong to the voters anymore, but instead to those with deep pockets and influence. And I am neither of those. Heal us, God. I'm also a bit lonely, God. It's been at least 7 months since I've seen some of my beloved friends and family members. I yearn to feel the warmth of their arms around me as we joyously scoop each other up in a gigantic bear hug. It feels like there is no end to this pandemic in sight. You've promised to never leave us nor forsake us. Keep your promise, God. One of my friends called me this week. God, she's brave and she reached out, but she's really struggling right now. Many of us are. Living with mental illness is challenging enough, but in a pandemic, while the nation argues about, well, everything, her resources for staying healthy are stretched, and the practices she usually counts on to keep her mentally strong are not working right now. Give all who feel unwanted or unloved, all who feel that the world would be better off without them. Give them strength and courage to get help when they need it. And help us to be friends who don't ignore or offer stupid platitudes, but who know how to sit in silence with those experiencing their darkest hours. God, I'm also worried about the many who have lost their jobs, whose savings has withered away to pennies, if they even had any savings in the first place. I mourn for those who have lost homes and loved ones in fires that continue to rage. God, our kids spend a lot of time in front of screens, and many actually yearn to be in school, not at a computer in their bedroom. I'm worried about students and teachers and administrators working so hard to do it all, to teach and listen, to care, innovate, and learn. I'm heartsick for those who are still, in 2020, having to protest and kneel and continue to remind us that Black Lives Matter. There is so much going on right now, God. So much. And sometimes it feels as if it might overtake me. Like I might drown in worry or suffocate from anxiety. But something else inside of me is whispering. No, it's more like it's screaming. We're going to make it. We are going to make it. Just hang on. And I'm convinced it's hope. Hope is relentless that way, always pursuing us, reaching out a strong arm to save us as we are drowning. You are our hope, God. You are hope. You do not dismiss our pain, but invite us to come and to rest, to weep and abide. Even as we no longer know who to trust, you are trustworthy. Hear us now as we trust and pray those words your Son taught us to pray, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
You have heard that it was said, You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? In 1 Corinthians 12:31 through 1 Corinthians 13:1-7. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful, or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things.
One of the more interesting details that emerged after the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was her deep and enduring friendship with Justice Antonin Scalia. Now, here are two people who couldn't be any further apart, who couldn't be any more ideological enemies or opponents. I mean, they vehemently and passionately disagreed on important matters. But yet somehow in the midst of that, they maintained a deep friendship. They were able to respect one another. They were able to see the goodness in each other. These two ideological enemies reminded us that you can disagree without being disagreeable, that you don't have to think alike to love alike. During the month of October, we're continuing our series on holy chaos, getting creative in the midst of conflict. It seemed like a relevant theme leading up to the election, right? And here I am on the rooftop of the beautiful Oxford Hotel in downtown Bend, just to remind us that sometimes we get stuck in the fray, kind of get stuck in the minutia and get kind of caught down in the fray. And often one of the ways to get creative in conflict is to rise above the fray, to get a broader perspective, to get a new perspective. You know, it's not our differences that divide us. It is how we choose to engage in those differences that create division. What are the three things that we're not supposed to talk about? Politics, religion, sex. I'll leave the topic of sex for another day. But I really believe our common life together is poorer and actually more shallow because we have avoided talking about politics and religion. I mean, we retreat to our echo chambers to kind of confirm what we think we already know. And we're not invited into conversations where we can hold the tension of complexity, conversations that are deep and meaningful. We have assumed that us and them has to mean us against them. That's the dance that we're dancing. I mean, is there another way? I don't think the issue is to disagree less. I think we need to learn how to disagree better. So is there another way? I mean, community, authentic relationships, wisdom, connection, growth. All of those things exist on the other side of conflict. One of the challenges, I think, of our day right now, one of the spiritual challenges of our day, is there's so much ugliness and polarization and animosity and hate. One of our spiritual dangers, I think, is to engage that ugliness